They wanted a pawn. She became the checkmate. The universe had always been noisy. Pulsars screamed across the void. Solar flares sang in tongues of plasma. And yet amid the chaos, one signal cut through with bureaucratic precision. Humanity of Sol 3. You have been selected for interspecies diplomacy by decree of the Celestial Accordance Coalition. Translation: You've been volunteered for a cosmic evaluation by beings who think PowerPoint presentations are an art form. Naturally, Earth did what Earth does best: argue. Politicians scrambled, scientists hypothesized, and social media turned it into a meme war. Meanwhile, tucked away in a corner of low-orbit training facility Theta 9, Sergeant Ari Voss ignored the headlines. She had exactly two priorities: breathing control and trajectory correction. She was mid-punch when the teleportation hit. One moment she was testing a zero-G combat dummy. The next she was surrounded by what could only be described as a coral reef having a panic attack. The colors, the shifting walls, the smell of existential dread, all unmistakably alien. A being with the posture of a melted candelabra stepped forward, 7 eyes blinking asynchronously. "Welcome, selected representative. You have been chosen." Ari cracked her knuckles. "Yeah? Well, I don't do politics." "Perfect," the alien replied with what might have been glee. "Neither do we. This is a test of survival." The chamber they dropped Ari into looked like someone had tried to recreate an amphitheater after watching a single, grainy video of a Roman Colosseum while under the influence of psychedelic algae. The floors shimmered, the walls breathed, and the ceiling occasionally wept light. In the center stood a pedestal, atop which floated a hologram of the Coalition's sigil, a triangle wrapped in vines, surrounded by orbiting eyes. "Begin introductory orientation," chirped a voice far too enthusiastic for something labeled Trial of Species Endurance. The projection flickered. A being composed entirely of glassy shards and nervous energy appeared. "Greetings. You are the chosen combatant of Sol 3. The Celestial Accordance Coalition has decided that your kind must demonstrate your capacity for survival, strategy, and psychological resilience through structured conflict." "So," Ari muttered, arms crossed, "this is a fight club with PowerPoint. We prefer the term evolutionary assessment." The rules, such as they were, included no artificial weapons, no outside assistance, and no mercy. Each round would pit Ari against an opponent selected from the Coalition's archives, creatures known for ruthlessness, cunning, or simply monstrous biology. Her first challenge arrived not with ceremony, but with a slurp. A slick, quadrupedal creature with skin like glistening obsidian emerged from a fissure in the floor. It hissed, a sound like sandpaper across wet glass, and bounded forward on spring-loaded legs. Ari exhaled, centered her stance, and waited. It lunged. She pivoted. 2 fingers jabbed its throat equivalent, another hand grabbing its limb as she used its momentum to slam it into the ground. It didn't rise again. Round 1 passed. The audience, unseen but very much present, made itself known via tremors of sound, vibration, and flashes of bioluminescence. Somewhere, a betting system crashed from the weight of impossible odds. Between matches, they gave her sustenance, a nutrient gel with the taste and texture of regret, and a chamber to rejuvenate. The walls pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. That was not comforting. Ari studied every alien that entered. Guards wore semi-organic armor that twitched when they walked. Observers floated rather than stood. And cameras were everywhere, embedded in the very walls, blinking like nervous insects. "Your performance," said one of the handlers, a quadruped with translucent fur and a voice that echoed in reverse, "has exceeded preliminary estimates." "You expected me to fail?" "Yes, most species do." Her smirk returned. "Then you picked the wrong pawn." The second trial was a maze flooded with magnetic interference. Ari's opponent was a hunter species from a planet with perpetual twilight, adapted to stalk prey silently and pounce when least expected. Except Ari wasn't prey. She laid traps of her own, not mechanical ones, but behavioral. She baited the creature with her scent, left auditory misdirection, forced it into a pattern. When it lunged, she was ready. 2 broken limbs and a crushed windpipe later, the hunter was down. Round 2, complete. Now they watched her differently, less like a lab rat, more like something dangerous. Ari slept little, dreamed less, and trained relentlessly in that bizarre living chamber. Her mind replayed Earth's history: wars, survival, resilience through catastrophe. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was the last line between humanity and whatever these aliens decided irrelevant meant. She studied the coalition too. They weren't a unified body, not really. More like a committee held together by tradition and mutual suspicion. That made them exploitable. On her 4th day, she was summoned by an official so grandiose, his name required a 3-syllable vibrational preamble before being spoken. His body was composed of hexagonal prisms in constant flux. "Combatant Voss," he intoned, "you have earned high marks. But we worry. Your kind improvises." "You call it improvisation," she said. "We call it Tuesday." He made a noise like cracking ceramic. "You were meant to be tested," he hissed. "Not to scare the observers." Ari stood. "Let them see her posture, her gaze, her calm. Maybe next time, don't pick someone with nothing to lose." In the Coalition's long, tangled history, many species had surprised them, but no species had ever turned the test into a statement. Until now. Ari Voss wasn't playing their game. She was rewriting the rules. And they were starting to realize that the pawn they'd chosen had just made her opening move. The third opponent came with ceremony. A procession of chimes and bioluminescent banners preceded the emergence of the Draxolith Ravager, a creature revered as a living weapon by 3 warlike species. Its bulk barely fit through the arena gates, its segmented limbs ending in chisel-like claws. The moment its multifaceted eyes locked onto Ari, the crowd stilled. Ari did not move. She didn't fidget. She breathed. "Begin," intoned the announcer, whose voice sounded more subdued than usual. The Ravager charged. The ground trembled. Its screech split the air until it hit an empty space. Ari was gone. She had sidestepped at the last possible moment, rolled beneath its thunderous swing, and vaulted onto its back. Her hands found what her eyes had already memorized: a row of neural connectors along the spine. With 3 precise jabs, she severed its movement control. It collapsed, paralyzed. Applause, or the alien equivalent, came in shocked silence. One of the observers whispered to another, "Is she adapting mid-combat?" She was. Later, in her chamber, Ari faced a panel of Coalition scientists. "Explain how you neutralized the Ravager so quickly," one asked. Ari tilted her head. "Same way you scan our DNA, study, analyze, apply. But your species lacks the data processing capacity to—" "You keep underestimating human intuition," she interrupted. "Big mistake." They began to understand. This wasn't brute strength. This was intelligence shaped by desperation, and honed by centuries of chaos. Ari was evolution weaponized in real time. The next match was broadcast system-wide. Billions watched. This time her foe was a psionic wraith, a being of pure energy that attacked through fear, memory, and hallucination. The arena dimmed. Shadows crawled. The wraith whispered every doubt Ari had ever buried. But she was trained for war. She embraced the noise. When the specter tried to cloud her mind, she anchored herself in motion. Each kata, each stance was a lighthouse through the fog. She fought not the enemy's strength, but its arrogance. And when it dared to breach her thoughts, she turned the tables, offering it a carefully crafted nightmare of her own, a memory of her first battlefield, the scream of atmosphere-burned metal, the face of the comrade she couldn't save. The wraith recoiled, howled, and shattered into light. Subject has weaponized trauma, one alien muttered, awestruck. In the Coalition's databanks, new annotations appeared under Homo sapiens, Terran origin, adaptive combat instinct, psychological counterstrike potential, high tolerance for existential stress, and perhaps the most chilling, observational learning curve, exponential. For the first time, Coalition analysts began to debate not whether Ari would survive, but what humanity would become if others followed her example. She wasn't just surviving, she was evolving in real time. And the galaxy was watching. By the time Ari walked into the fifth arena, she no longer felt like a contestant. She felt like a demonstration, one meant to unsettle, to warn, to change perceptions in ways that diplomacy never could. The Coalition's newest move wasn't physical, it was psychological, a test of will through observation. No opponent, no countdown, no instructions. Just Ari, alone in a chamber lined with transparent viewing windows, behind which stood every variety of life form she'd seen since her abduction. Diplomats, scientists, strategists, watching her as if she were the last scene in a suspense opera. Ari squinted upward. Cameras tracked her instantly. She sat down in the middle of the room, cross-legged, closed her eyes, began to breathe. The first 30 minutes passed in silence. The observers waited for action, for weapons, for rage. Instead, Ari meditated. She let the tension bleed off her posture, let calm take over. In her stillness, she projected control, not serenity, authority, and they watched. In the control chamber above the arena, one Coalition strategist whispered, "She is reframing the test." "How so?" another asked. "By refusing to play." It was no longer about survival. Ari had seen through the show, through the cameras and trials and committees. This wasn't about testing humans. It was about showcasing the Coalition's power to themselves, keeping fear fresh, proving dominance. And now they feared her. After the fourth hour, the first diplomat cracked. A six-limbed mollusk named Trelevex buzzed through internal comms. "End it. She is destabilizing the psychological model." But they couldn't end it, not without admitting she'd won without a single strike. So they sent in a question. A projection formed before her. The image of her mother, her childhood home, her dog who died when she was 12. A subtle challenge. Identify illusion from memory. Fracture reality from within. Ari opened her eyes, smiled. "You're not bad at this," she said to the illusion. "But you're playing the wrong game." She stood, walked to the projection, touched its face. "We don't break that easily." The illusion flickered and dissolved. Up in the control tower, panic bloomed. Psychological warfare had failed. Perception control had failed. Ari Voss was now more than a representative. She was a myth forming in real time. Word spread across channels, civilian feeds, military encryptions, academic threads, all asking the same thing. How is she doing this? In one viral clip, Ari's image froze mid-step, her eyes piercing the lens, as if she could see the viewer. "What is she?" murmured a coalition elder. An AI researcher answered, "Exactly what we feared, a self-aware predator." That night, Ari was escorted back to her chamber. No words, no guards, just a long, silent corridor of lights that dimmed as she passed. When she reached her door, she found something new, a datapad, Coalition Standard issue, one message displayed. "We underestimated you. The board convenes tomorrow. You will be observed. Choose your words carefully." Ari placed the pad on her table. Then, methodically, she stretched, calibrated her breathing, and slept better than she had since arrival. Because tomorrow wasn't a test, it was a reckoning. The Coalition Grand Assembly met in a chamber suspended in orbit over a neutron star, as if the immense gravity could anchor the egos gathered within. Walls of shifting crystal refracted the starlight into patterns only certain species could see. Most called it majestic. Ari Voss found it pretentious. She stood alone at the center dais, unarmed, unadorned, and entirely unimpressed. Around her floated the delegates of 200 worlds, each positioned at a safe distance. By habit, not regulation. Screens hovered in place of paper, drones hummed silently above, and translators whispered in 29 dialects at once. "Let the record reflect," began Administrator Kell, whose voice resembled tectonic plates grinding, "that this hearing convenes to reassess the status of Sol 3 under the Celestial Accordance Accord." The implication was clear. They were hoping to recategorize Earth in a box they could control, preferably one with thick walls and no sharp edges. Ari tilted her head. "Before we start, who in this room has fought for their planet with their own hands?" The question dropped like a meteor into still water. Eyes, sensors, antennae, all turned. No one answered. "Thought so," she said. Delegate Maraxa, a being of light and pheromone, blinked nervously. "You misunderstand, Combatant Voss. The Crucible was a tradition, not a battlefield." "Everything is a battlefield if you're paying attention." She walked a slow, deliberate circle, gaze scanning the delegates. "Your trial wasn't about observing humans. It was about reminding yourselves you're the apex, that no matter how many species you let in, you still hold the top rung." A murmur passed through the chamber, translated as static, color pulses, and pheromonal waves. "The problem?" Ari continued, stopping dead center again. "You picked the wrong pawn." Administrator Kell rumbled. "We acknowledge your exemplary performance, but aggression is not integration. Neither is arrogance." She turned to the central monitor, summoned a display, a timeline of human conflict, world wars, revolutions, catastrophes, and still, resilience. "We didn't evolve because we were the strongest. We evolved because we adapt, survive, and if need be, we overcome." Kell leaned forward. "And now what? Do you propose war?" "No," Ari said, with a grin that made 3 delegates flinch. "I propose reality." She tapped the console again. Data streamed, her performance, analysis, the fear spreading through coalition ranks like a virus. "You can name us member, threat, anomaly, doesn't matter, because you all know what happens when something truly adaptive enters a closed system." She leaned in slightly, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "It rewrites the rules." A long silence followed. until a being composed of sentient mist whispered, "What do you want, human?" Ari stood tall. Full member status, no restrictions, access to tech databases, recognition of sovereignty on all human colonies. And one more thing, a permanent observer seat on this board. Gasps, electromagnetic discharges, a couple audible gulps. Unprecedented, spat Kel. So was the crucible outcome, Ari said. The vote began. One by one, hands, limbs, pulses, and lights cast their tallies. Majority in favor. Kel stared at her. You came here a test subject. You leave a policymaker. Ari turned, already walking toward the exit. No, she said without looking back. I leave as the future you failed to prepare for. The ripple began before Ari even stepped off the platform. Subspace channels exploded with transmissions, translated fragments of her speech, combat footage replayed from every angle, slow-motion breakdowns of her calm dismantling of the Coalition's most sacred traditions. On some worlds, she became a legend. On others, a warning. Back on the diplomatic vessel that now served as her temporary quarters, Ari stood by the viewport, watching the neutron star spin like a god's eye blink. Behind her, representatives clamored for interviews, deals, insights. She ignored them. You should know, said Captain Relics, the arthropoid bridge commander who'd first met her with barely concealed disgust. The stock value of human industries has tripled. Your people haven't even responded to our welcome transmission yet. They will, Ari said. He tilted his antennae. And when they do, the Coalition will need a new game plan. In the corridors of power, the aftermath grew stranger. The Mercurian Consensus signed a non-aggression pact with Earth. The fungal networks of Threx expanded their academic exchange grants to include human universities. And most shockingly, the Ardzek Dominion, a species previously listed as Do Not Engage, offered joint military exercises. Because even they had seen it. This wasn't the arrival of a new species. It was the emergence of a new paradigm. Coalition strategy boards began rewriting threat matrices. Models previously used to predict hostile planetary behavior now used Ari's Crucible footage as baselines. Training simulations for elite units were quietly adjusted to include Terran behavioral irregularities. And through it all, one haunting phrase kept echoing through encrypted diplomatic relays. They sent a pawn. It played like a queen. Ari noticed the shift too. Fewer guards, more eyes. Every encounter became a negotiation, even the friendly ones, because the delegates now understood. Every word she spoke might ripple through 100 systems. In a moment of private silence, she activated the secure channel Earth had finally responded with. General Kalen's face filled the screen. She looked haggard, sharp-eyed. Lieutenant Voss, or should I say, Ambassador Voss. Ari smirked. Let's not make that a habit. Kalen's smile was tight. We've reviewed the accords. Impressive work. You trained me well. A pause. We're sending a diplomatic contingent. And a science team. You've cracked open the universe, Ari. Now we have to live in it. Good. Just make sure they're not idiots. Kalen leaned forward. They're not you, but they'll learn. We're fast learners. As the channel closed, Ari let herself relax. A little, just a breath. But deep within the Coalition network, something darker stirred. Not all members were pleased with Earth's arrival. Not all believed in diplomacy. A new threat emerged, coded, encrypted, and marked urgent. Initiate Project Glass Cage. Contain the Terran anomaly before it becomes systemic. In the shadows of progress, fear had taken root. And Ari Voss? She was just getting started. Project Glass Cage was not a strategy. It was a reaction. A secret coalition within the coalition, formed of species too proud, too afraid, or too entrenched to accept Earth's sudden rise. Their mandate was simple: contain Ari Voss, not eliminate. That would invite war, but to box her in, redirect her influence, isolate humanity under layers of policy, protocol, and quiet sabotage. The first move came in the form of a cultural quarantine. Earth's media broadcasts were restricted from coalition channels, a necessary pause to allow other species time to adapt to Terran content. Ari responded by starting an open-source archive hosted on a Martian server cluster, fully mirrored across 7 neutral systems. The second move, economic friction. Suddenly, trade routes promised to Earth were redirected. Bureaucratic delays, lost paperwork, sanctions cloaked in legal ambiguity. Ari filed every complaint with exacting precision and sent each one CC'd to every major economic news outlet in coalition space. By week's end, the embargo backfired. Stock in human goods surged. Demand outpaced suppression. The third move was subtler: isolation. At a formal gathering in the nebular city of Sheer, Ari found herself deliberately boxed out of key discussions. Interpreters mistranslated her statements. Invitations were lost in transit. So she crashed the meetings. When the Threxian Science Guild met to discuss AI regulation, Ari arrived uninvited, cited her rights as a coalition observer, and then delivered a 10-minute presentation on Earth's AI history that left half the room scribbling notes and the other half nervously calculating what else they didn't know about humans. Back on the diplomatic vessel, her aide, an avian scribe named Peltry, fluttered in distress. "You are provoking them." "I'm reminding them," Ari said, "that we didn't come here to be ornamental." Meanwhile, the true architects of Glass Cage grew desperate. Ari's influence only expanded. She wasn't just countering their moves. She was learning, adapting, turning every constraint into leverage. So they activated Phase 4, a manufactured scandal, leaked documents, accusations of Terran espionage, claims that Ari had used psionic manipulation during her Crucible trial. A public hearing was convened. She arrived early, dressed not in formal attire, but in her flight suit. Hair tied back, a tablet in one hand, her Crucible footage cued and cross-referenced with coalition ethics codes. As the tribunal opened, the lead accuser, a delegate named Zorek, began with fury and falsehoods. Ari let him speak. She even took notes. Then she stood, played the footage, spoke with precision. "You accuse me of deception, but I acted under your rules, your test, your judgment. I won, and now you're afraid of what that means." Her words didn't echo. They pierced. One by one, delegates turned, not to accuse, but to listen. A verdict was reached, not guilty, charges dismissed, and an unprecedented vote passed, shielding future coalition members from politically motivated trials without overwhelming evidence. Glass Cage collapsed in on itself. But Ari knew better than to celebrate. They weren't done. They would try again, in different forms. Hidden hands always moved behind the curtains of power. So she leaned into the light. More interviews, more open sessions, more diplomacy on her terms. Because the best way to defeat fear was to become the one truth it could no longer deny. Ari Voss stood before the newly assembled Terran delegation complex, a gleaming structure orbiting the coalition capital. Around her, a dozen flags fluttered in artificial breeze, each representing a planet now aligned with Earth. Not formally, not publicly, but unmistakably. The coalition had survived Earth's entry, Barely. But what emerged was no longer the same brittle hierarchy. Delegates no longer looked at Ari with suspicion. They looked with calculation, with caution, and, on the rarest faces, respect. Ari adjusted the collar of her utility jacket and faced the holographic transmission panel. Earth's leaders were watching. So were billions across 100 systems. She was no longer a pawn, not even a queen. She was the board. "Ladies, gentlemen, beings of photonic cohesion," she began, "we stand on the edge of something dangerous. Not war, not peace, something harder, collaboration." A pause, a ripple of stillness. "This galaxy doesn't need another empire. It needs rules that respect difference, strength that protects the weak, and dialogue that doesn't end when it's inconvenient." She stepped back, letting her message settle. And in that silence, the change crystallized. No thunderous applause, no fireworks, just agreement, quiet, powerful, and real. Later that night, Ari watched Earthrise from the panoramic deck, joined only by Peltry. "You never planned this, did you?" the avian asked softly. "No," she replied. "They did, by thinking they could control the unknown." Peltry fluffed his feathers. "And now?" Ari smiled. "Now we play the long game." Across the stars, species whispered her name, not as myth, not as threat, but as precedent. A reminder. Sometimes the galaxy doesn't change with warships or treaties. Sometimes it changes when someone refuses to be what they were chosen to be, and chooses to be something more.